highlighting history of suburban Sydney with the St Peter's Cooks River History Group.
Our aim is to preserve and promote local history.
We are based at St Peter's in Sydney's inner west.
Remnants of historical Parramatta can be discovered within today's modern commercial centre.
Parramatta Park, a major urban park and historic site, was established by Governor and Mrs Macquarie. It was proclaimed a public park in 1857.
Within the park, Old Government House, the oldest surviving government house in Australia, stands on the site of a cottage built in 1790 by Governor Phillip. Governor Hunter's 1799 two-storey brick building was extended and a portico added by Governor Macquarie. The house ceased being used as a vice-regal residence in 1855. From 1909 until 1962, the house was leased to King's School.
Transit stones are all that remain of an observatory built by Governor Brisbane in 1822. The observatory building fell into ruin and was demolished in 1848.
A bathhouse, completed in 1823 for Governor Brisbane, has been converted into a pavilion.
A memorial commemorates the place where Lady Fitzroy and the Governor's aide, Lieutenant Charles Masters, were killed when their carriage, driven by Governor Fitzroy, overturned and hit a tree in 1847.
The Boer War Memorial was unveiled in 1904. The first Australian troops to arrive in Africa came from Parramatta's Lancer Barracks.
The William E. Hart Memorial commemorates an early pioneering cross-country flight from Penrith to Parramatta Park in 1911.
In the Dairy Precinct, the Dairy Cottage was constructed between 1796 and 1805 by ex-convict George Salter. The adjacent Rangers Cottage was built around 1870.
Gatehouses are located at the park's entrances.
The first Macquarie Gatehouse was built in 1848 following the death of Lady Mary Fitzroy. The present house was largely constructed in 1887.
The original Queen's Road Gatehouse was erected in 1873.
The Maze Hill Gatehouse dates from 1879.
The Tudor-style George Street Gatehouse is a landmark. It was built in 1885 on the site of Governor Macquarie's small stone lodge.
Many notable buildings are located on George Street.
Brislington Medical and Nursing Museum is a two-storey Georgian house built in 1821 for ex-convict John Hodges. The house became the residence of Dr. Walter Brown, who named it Brislington. For 3 generations, the Brown family practiced medicine at the residence before it was used as a nurse's home, then as self-contained accommodation for resident medical officers of Parramatta Hospital.
Today's Woolpack Hotel began as the Freemasons' Arms, becoming the Woolpack Inn in 1821. Originally located on the northern corner of today's Marsden and George Streets, it was rebuilt across the road in 1895 to make way for Parramatta's second courthouse.
Opposite the hotel is the tower of the 1896 courthouse.
Lachlan Macquarie Chambers are located in a 1930s Rural Bank Art Deco building.
The former Westpac Bank stands on a site occupied by banks since 1874.
St Patrick's Inn, opposite Red Cow Lane, was built in 1823 by former convict John Hamilton.
The Roxy Theatre, built in 1930, was one of Australia's premier theatre palaces. It became the second cinema in New South Wales to be classified by the National Trust of Australia. It has been redeveloped into a state-of-the-art entertainment complex described as the Jewel of the West.
A former residence and shop was at one time occupied by the Lowe Pty Ltd confectionery, run by a Polish aristocratic political refugee family.
Perth House was built in 1841 for pastoralist George Oakes. In the 1890s, it was rented by Mrs. Bell, who ran a small private school. In the 1980s, used as a funeral parlour. In the early 1990s, the house was restored as commercial offices and a large multi-storey building developed at the rear.
Harrisford House is where King's School opened in 1832.
In Smith Street, Lancer Barracks, completed in 1828, was originally called the Upper Military Barracks. It was home to a number of British infantry regiments. When British troops were withdrawn in the 1850s, it was used by the police and government until it became home to the Lancers in 1891.
Linden House, a museum within Lancer Barracks, was originally a school of industry located on Macquarie Street. It was renamed Linden House and used for various purposes, including an RSL club. The property was bought by AMP Society in 1963 and given to the Royal New South Wales Lancers Association. It was removed stone by stone to its present site.
On Macquarie Street, Kiora was designed and built in 1841-42 by architect James Hewson.
The Lee Memorial Uniting Church opened as a Wesleyan church in 1885.
In Centenary Square, St John's Cathedral's foundation stone was laid in 1852. The original 1803 St John's Church was damaged by a storm in 1841. 9 years later, it was described as a perfect ruin. It is the oldest church site in continuous use in Australia.
Outside St John's Cathedral is the Royal Gate, a memorial to those who served in World War I.
The town hall was built in 2 stages. The council chambers opened in 1881, the more ceremonial town hall in 1883.
The elaborate centennial drinking fountain was erected in 1888 to mark Parramatta's centenary.
The horse parapet building was constructed in 1881 for Cyrus Edgar Fuller, owner of the Cumberland Mercury newspaper. Fuller's affection for horses and horse racing is believed to have inspired him to add the statues to the building.
When Murray Brothers built their new multi-storey premises, it dominated Church Street.
In Church Street, the University of New England occupies a former 1870s post and telegraph office. The building was a working post office until 1966. It was used as a storeroom, exhibition space, and by telecom until the early 1980s, when it became a restaurant.
On the corner of Church and Phillip Streets, the late Victorian building with a dome was erected for the Cumberland Building Land and Investment Society in 1889. From 1898 until 1909, it was used as a dental surgery, then occupied by a series of banks until 1996.
Lennox Bridge was built between 1836 and 1839. Archaeologists overseeing construction work on the bridge uncovered a pier of one of Australia's first bridges built between 1802 and 1804.
North of the bridge is St Peter's Uniting Church, formerly a congregational church. The foundation stone was laid in 1871 by Mr John Fairfax, founder of the Sydney Morning Herald.
Prince Alfred Park is one of the oldest public parks in New South Wales. It was the site of Parramatta's second jail and first female factory. It was authorised as a village green by Governor Burke in 1837 and was referred to as the Old Jail Green. It was named Alfred Square in 1868 to commemorate a visit to Parramatta by Prince Alfred.
Located in the square on the corner of Victoria Road and Marsden Street is the Anderson Fountain, named after Dr Matthew Anderson, a surgeon who arrived in Parramatta in 1827 to take up the post of colonial government surgeon. On his death, he bequeathed £200 for the construction of a drinking fountain. Originally located near the town hall, it was moved to Prince Alfred Park to make way for the centennial fountain.
In December 1890, a bandstand was erected.
The Parramatta War Memorial commemorates the First World War. A life-size statue of a First World War soldier was unveiled in 2019.
In 1954, the Gollan Memorial Clock Tower was built on the corner of Church Street and Victoria Road. It commemorates the services of the Honourable G.C. Gollan, member of the Legislative Assembly, who represented Parramatta for 21 years.
On the Victoria Road footpath, Bill's Horse Trough is one of 500 troughs built throughout New South Wales and Victoria.
St Patrick's Church was built in 1936 on the site of an 1854 building which had been demolished, leaving only the tower and spire intact. In 1986, St Patrick's was designated a cathedral. In 1996, it was destroyed by fire, with only the walls remaining. A large contemporary cathedral opened in 2003. The rebuilt St Patrick's is now a Blessed Sacrament chapel.
Behind St Patrick's is Murphy House, built in 1904 as the church presbytery.
All Saints Church on Victoria Road was built on land left in the will of the Reverend Samuel Marsden. He also bequeathed £200 for the erection of a church. The church was consecrated by Bishop Broughton in 1848. It was extended in 1862 and a steeple added.
On the corner of O'Connell and Hunter Streets is the Travellers' Rest Inn group of buildings. The Georgian Corner building was erected as an inn. It has served many purposes, including use as a hostel for homeless men in the 1890s.
North of the river, Bayonami Public School is located in the 1836 King's School building. Roseneath was built in the late 1830s as a home for Janet Templeton, a Scottish widow who became a pioneering pastoralist in Australia. In the latter half of the 19th and early 20th centuries, it was occupied by a number of small denominational private schools, one of which developed into Tara, a major independent school for girls in Parramatta.
Avondale was built around 1900. It passed through a succession of owners as a private residence and briefly operated as a private hospital and private school.
Part of Cumberland Hospital was originally the Parramatta Female Factory, the largest and oldest surviving convict women's site in Australia. It became an asylum for lunatic and invalid convicts in 1847. The Parramatta Lunatic Asylum was officially gazetted a public asylum in 1849, later becoming Parramatta Psychiatric Centre and the Cumberland Hospital from 1993.
The Roman Catholic Orphan School, established in 1844, became the Parramatta Industrial School for Girls in 1886. It later became known as the Parramatta Girls' Home.
Parramatta Jail has been on this site since 1842. Between 1928 and 1939, it was considered to be New South Wales' principal manufacturing jail. In the 1940s, the jail was utilised as a factory to make war supplies. In the 1970s, a linen service operated from the jail. The jail closed in 2012.
In Marsden Street, the Heritage Courtyard Pavilion commemorates the site of Parramatta hospitals for over 200 years. Archaeological remains and historical information are displayed.
St Andrew's Presbyterian Church, on the corner of Marsden and Phillip Streets, was completed in 1925. It replaced an 1840s church which was moved to Wentworthville in the 1920s.
In Phillip Street, George Coates and Son built St George's Terrace in 1881. It is proposed to retain the original portion of the terrace in the new Powerhouse Museum.
Other historic buildings in the Parramatta area are Experiment Farm Cottage, built by Surgeon John Harris. It is located on part of the first land grant made in New South Wales to ex-convict James Roos after he successfully grew the first wheat in the colony at Rose Hill.
Elizabeth Farm, Australia's oldest homestead, was built in 1793 as the home of John MacArthur and his wife Elizabeth.
Hambledon Cottage, part of the Elizabeth Farm estate, was used as additional accommodation by the MacArthur family and their friends. The best known resident was Penelope Lucas, governess to the MacArthur daughters.
The building at the University of Western Sydney, which houses the Whitlam Institute and the Margaret Whitlam Galleries, was a female orphan school built by Governor Macquarie. The building was modelled on his wife's childhood home in Scotland, Aird's House. In 1818, the girls from the Sydney Orphan School were relocated to the building. In 1850, boys were transferred there and it became known as the Protestant Orphan School. The building was repurposed in the late 1880s for psychiatric patients. For nearly 100 years, the Rydalmere Psychiatric Hospital treated patients suffering from mental illnesses, ranging from lunacy to senile dementia. In 1995, the New South Wales Government transferred ownership to the University of Western Sydney.
Parramatta, Australia's second oldest European settlement, has more heritage-listed buildings than Sydney's historic rocks area.
If you have enjoyed this video, subscribe to our channel. It's free. Coming soon, Granville, Centre of Industry. And check out our website, stpeterscooksriverhistory.wordpress.com.